house of God, eh? It is, isn't it? Do you know what? I think we should just have a round of applause for these guys who are just leading so well. I tell you what, you are so blessed to have them here in this church, and the Jedi at the back over there. It's fantastic. Obi-Wan from now on. One of my favorite verses is when David says, better is one day in your house than thousands elsewhere. And I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God. There you go. Than a king anywhere else, I think it says, does it? So my name's Mike. I work for the Leprosy Mission, if you haven't gathered that already. I've been working for the Leprosy Mission since around Christmas, so I know everything there is to know about leprosy. So you can ask me whatever you want, and I'm sure we'll be good. So I'm not particularly new to leprosy, so all will be revealed. I thought it'd be good just to introduce myself. This is just some pictures of my family. So this is my wife, Rosie. We have been married for 20 years this year. So I know, yeah. Round of applause for me, I think. Say that because she's not here. We've got 4 boys. Yeah, I know. The 2 eldest are my stepchildren, so they're 26 and 24. And we've got Caleb, who is 16, nearly 17, and Ben, who's 11. And this picture at the top here sums them up quite well, to be honest. You can see Ben, the little one, just throwing himself off the wall, just loves life. He's been in the pantomime over Christmas, and he wants to be the next Spider-Man, so that gives you a little insight into him. Incredibly creative. Caleb, next to him there, is the 16-year-old. He just takes everything in his stride. So you can see he's probably jumped from the highest points, and he's just, here I am, just take it all in his stride. Meanders through life and lands on his feet all the time, so he's an absolutely lovely kid. Josh, next to him, is the eldest. He's 26, and you can't quite see there, but he's kind of grimacing. So he sort of throws himself into everything with gritted teeth. But no, he absolutely loves life. He is an incredible musician as well, worship leader, and he's married to Abby at the bottom there. They're both worship leaders and youth pastors in our church in Chester. So that's fantastic. And Sam on the end there is our 24-year-old who throws himself at things. He is very focused, shall we say. I was going to say narrow-minded, but we'll say focused. He's not narrow-minded at all. He's focused. So he's become an avid climber, and he has moved to Canada to enjoy the climbing. Let's be fair. He's also a cabinet maker. So so that's my family, my immediate family, and we all live in North Wales on a little farm with my mum and dad, where we're trying to run a Christian retreat centre and a mental health and wellbeing centre as well. These are some pictures of me as a little boy. My parents were missionaries, so my sister and I grew up in the Congo, or what was then Zaire, right in the middle of the jungle. 500 miles to the west was Kinshasa, which was the capital city. 500 miles to the east was Kigali, which is in Rwanda. And in between those two capital cities was dense jungle, and we lived right in the middle of it. Dad was, to be honest, he was an atheist, an absolute sworn atheist. And in fact, he swore that he would never set foot in a church again. And God gave him a real road to Damascus sort of conversion, bolt of lightning type of thing, and he went from darkness to light, no questions asked, within 5 minutes. It's an incredible story, but I'm not going to go into all of that now. So that was in the early 80s. He immediately threw himself into telling everybody because, at the time, the song Amazing Grace had been in the charts. It had been quite high up in the charts. So he knew it off by heart. And they sang it in church the day he got saved. And it suddenly rang true to him. The message of saved a wretch like me, I can't remember where I was going with that now. Never mind. So Dad threw himself into service, threw himself into telling people about Jesus, ran youth groups amongst the council estates and various things, and became a Tear Fund rep. You might have heard of Tear Fund. So he ran a market stall on a Saturday to sell tearcraft to raise money for Tear Fund, and they went and spoke at various events, similar to what I'm doing now, I guess. And they were at a mission meeting, and Dad really felt like God said to him, "Are you willing to give up everything and follow me?" He'd been a Christian for about 4 years at this point. And Dad was like, "Well, yeah, of course I am." You know, his life had become all about Jesus. So that was sort of the call that he got. And within a week or two, he'd seen this advert to go to the Congo as a missionary. And so that began our life in Africa. So Dad was teaching carpentry. That's what he went for. Although he got there and realized that you can't buy wood, you can't buy nails, you can't buy glue, you can't buy screws or anything like that. Fortunately, we were in the jungle, so you could cut wood down, but they didn't have any tools. So they sort of put word out that we needed some tools to cut trees down. And you might be able to see down here at the bottom, there's a huge 8-foot saw there. And they'd cut these trees down. They'd have a guy on top pulling the saw up, and a guy in a pit underneath pulling it down again. And that's how they cut the wood into planks. It was really hard work. And I have to say, the guys were incredibly strong as well. These are some of the apprentices that Dad taught cabinet making. The guy in the middle actually is now a pastor, and he runs quite a large church in Kinshasa. He's got an incredible story as well, but I haven't got time for that tonight either, I'm afraid. So he realized that not only was he there to teach carpentry, he was there to teach a lot more than that as well. You can see in the far picture, there's some pictures of some bricks drying out there, which have been formed from clay that they got out of the ground. They would dry out for 7 days, and then they'd pile them into these kilns that you can see in the middle and burn them for 3 days, 3 nights, until they got these beautiful golden bricks. And this is a teacher's house that they built. This was a school that they built above here. And the guy in the middle standing in the trailer, I liked him. His name was Alanga, and he taught me to drive when I was 11. So one of my favorites. But yeah. They also did some horticultural stuff, and Dad was a boat builder by trade. So they also built some river boats, because as you can see, the roads are not particularly good. That picture on the top right there is a picture of the equivalent of the M6. It was the main road through the country, and this was a common occurrence, getting stuck. So he also did some road building. And you can see Mum there doing some sewing with some of the ladies. She did as much as she could with them, but it was quite difficult because the ladies did everything in that society. They'd obviously look after the kids and raise the kids. They'd also do the cooking. They'd also have to tend the gardens. They'd also have to fetch the water. And they'd have to fetch the firewood as well to make the fire to be able to cook. And the guys hunted once a month. And that was about all they did, to be honest. We lived in a tribe that was proud to be known as the laziest tribe in Africa. So you can imagine Dad having the calling to create work in this environment was no mean feat. So we lived on an old leprosy missionary station that had been set up in the late 1800s, initially as a hospital and a primary school. When they built the hospital, the doctor realized there was a huge problem with leprosy where we were. So 5 miles into the jungle, in the middle of the swamps, they found an island where they built a leprosy colony. And that was where we lived. So in the 1930s, they started to be able to treat leprosy and to cure people from it. So by the time we got there in the 80s, they'd also built a Bible school and a high school and the wood workshops where Dad was working in the village. So I grew up with leprosy patients around us, and so I knew really firsthand what it meant to have leprosy and really the devastating effects it has on you. Because these guys, they couldn't go any further than sort of 50 yards from their own house. And the house was just 2 rooms. One was an open room, and then there was a room that was they had a door on it that could be shut. One of the problems with leprosy is the massive stigma that goes with it. So you're very often rejected from your community, rejected from your village, as it was in our case, rejected from your family. So these guys had nowhere to go. They faced immense rejection, and obviously in a society where there was no social security, there was no one to look after them. So the Leprosy Mission was there, fortunately, and had been there for a long time. And that was part of my upbringing. Matthew 22, when Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment? I've got this from the Message version, because sometimes I find that you can get too used to your own version, can't you? So I've started reading this one because it's completely different, and I don't miss the message then. I actually get the message rather than just read the words. Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your passion and prayer and intelligence. This is the most important and the first on any list. But the second is set alongside it. Love others as well as you love yourself. These 2 commands are pegs. Everything in God's law and the prophets hangs from them. I mean, that's it in a nutshell, isn't it, really, the Christian life? Love God with everything that you've got. If you haven't got a relationship with God, having a relationship with God is the best thing that you can do in your life. It is the only way to live. Jesus said, I have come that you might have life and life to the full. And I can tell you from personal experience that is true. And the second thing, but it's not really second, it's alongside it, equal, is love everybody else as much as you love yourself. So, this is a locker. Any idea where she is? It's not Africa. Asia. It's not Uganda. She's in Bangladesh. And she's picking tea leaves. So hopefully, every time you make a cup of tea after this, you'll think about this story, and it will remind you about it. The great British drink. I've been told 20% of us put milk in first when we make a cup of tea. Come on, let's have a show of hands. Who puts the milk in first? About 20%, yeah. Good. Church I was in this morning, it was the majority. I thought, oh no, I'm in the wrong place here. It's funny what divides us, isn't it, as people? These tea gardens are roughly the size of a county. I'm not sure which county, but that's what they told me. So they're big anyway. And you can see there's over 600,000 people who live and work in the tea gardens. And almost every family is affected by leprosy. I find that absolutely staggering. The population of Manchester, according to Google, is about 552,000 people. So if you imagine the amount of people who live in Manchester and every family being affected by leprosy. That's incredible, isn't it? It is the highest concentration of leprosy in the world and the highest concentration of leprosy transmission in the world as well. So there's new people all the time getting it. One of the big problems is the Leprosy Mission has been going for 150 years, and we only found leprosy in the tea gardens in 2017. So just 6 years ago. So we have a mountain to climb there. And I find it quite incredible, really, that, we tend to think of ourselves as in a really well-connected world, don't we? And yet there's a massive community there that we didn't know about at all that had leprosy, which means there could well be more. Back to Aloka. She was diagnosed with leprosy. When I first heard the word leprosy, I was so frightened. It's so hard for us to understand what that means, isn't it? Because leprosy is not a threat to us. There are no cases of leprosy in Britain. And to be honest, even if we came across it, because our immune systems are so much better, we probably wouldn't catch it anyway. But in 2019, I was diagnosed with cancer. And that's the big fear in our society, isn't it? The C word is what you don't want the doctors to say to you. And it sends you on an emotional roller coaster for yourself, for your family, for your friends. But we can kind of identify with that, because if it hasn't happened to us, probably all of us have got at least a family or family member or friend who have been affected by cancer. And for them, it's leprosy. The difference is that here, my wife and my kids, my family and my friends all gathered around me. We've got an incredible health system here and a support system. With these people, they're the poorest of the poor. And there's a lot of misinformation about leprosy. So these people are often rejected as soon as they are diagnosed. I was reading about a lady in India who was diagnosed with leprosy. She'd ignored it for a while, but then she started to be able to not use her hands. And so she went to the hospital, found out she had leprosy. Immediately, her husband kicked her out and took the 2 children and moved to the other side of India so that she could never find them again. And this kind of story happens again and again. And I think from my 4 months in the Leprosy Mission, so it's not long, but what's really struck me is the rejection is actually so much worse than the leprosy itself, even though the leprosy causes disability. I heard about a little boy who I think he was 10 years old, 10 or 12 he was, and he had leprosy. And the doctor, through a translator, sat down on the bed with him. The doctor put his arm around him. He said, look, to be able to save your life, to be able to stop you from getting any worse, I'm going to have to amputate your legs. And the boy burst out crying. He was absolutely distraught. The doctor said, no, I don't think he understands. I'm saying if I do this, I'll be able to save his life. And the translator said, no, doctor, you don't understand. The boy's not crying because of that. He's crying because you're the first person to touch him and put your arm around him for years. So the rejection is awful. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. We're going to hear a little bit from Aloka herself, of her story.
In the beautiful tea gardens of Bangladesh, the air is fresh and you can hear the chatter of the tea pickers and the birds singing above them. But while the trees and tea shrubs flourish, an invasive weed has taken root: leprosy. This feared disease is more common here than anywhere else in the world, and nearly every family is affected by leprosy. Fathers, mothers, and children too. If leprosy is not stopped now, there will be devastating consequences, not only for those working in the tea gardens, but for the whole of Bangladesh.
My name is Aloka Gonju, and I live with my family in the tea gardens. Everything I do is for my family. I want them to have a good life. I worked in the tea gardens, picking leaves for about 40 years. Every day before the sun has barely risen, I walk 15 kilometers to work. 2 years ago, I noticed a small discolored patch on my left hand. It didn't seem to cause any problems at first, so I carried on working. But over time, I lost the strength in my hand. My fingers became stiff and bent. I really struggled to grip the tea leaves and pull them off the bushes. I can't carry or hold anything with my left hand anymore. As my hands slowly got weaker, I was overwhelmed with worry. Who would look after me and my family if I couldn't work? Without my job, we'd also lose our home. I felt sick with stress and lost a lot of weight. How would we survive? Someone doing health screening from the Leprosy Mission came to my house. She noticed my hands and sent me for a test. I had leprosy. I'm thankful because she found me and made sure I had the medicine I needed. But I'm sad that I was cured too late to stop the damage to my hand. I need help to make my hand work again because I can't earn enough now. I work as fast as I can to pick as many leaves as possible, but I can only pick half the amount I used to. And half the leaves means half the pay. If my hand gets worse, I'll have no reason to live. I want to look after my family, to pick tea and earn enough. I don't want anyone else to suffer like me. I tell people to go to the doctor for treatment. Please help us to find people with leprosy so they can be cured. My dream is that there would be no more leprosy cases in the tea gardens.
I work in the tea gardens and I diagnose and treat more than 250 people every year. I dress wounds caused by leprosy and teach people how to care for disabled limbs themselves. I am so happy every time someone is found and cured from leprosy, but I know there are so many more people who need to be found before it's too late. The disease is still spreading. We have to stop it right now. Please, will you help us?
Today in the tea gardens of Bangladesh, there are many people like Aloka who need to be cured before leprosy devastates their bodies. People living in fear for the future. People losing the ability to work and care for their families. Leprosy must not be allowed to continue to spread. It must be rooted out now. We believe that every person deserves life in all its fullness. With your help, we will train healthcare workers to find, diagnose, and cure people with leprosy. Your compassion can prevent disability, protect livelihoods, and finally stop the spread of this disease. Together, we can create a future where leprosy has no hold over families and communities in Bangladesh, a future where people will truly flourish.
A gift of £10 a month gives life-changing reconstructive surgery to someone like Aloka. A one-off gift of £24 cures one person of leprosy. £111 provides a pop-up clinic to find and diagnose.
So the good news is, it is curable. And it doesn't cost the earth. £24 will cure someone of leprosy. What's that? A couple of costas and a cake? Something like that? It's fantastic. 1 John chapter 3. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees his brother in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words and speech, but with actions and in truth. We came back from Africa when I was 13 years old. And it's fair to say I had a massive culture shock. And really through my teenage years and probably going into my 20s, I really battled with why was I born British? Why was I born into a world that's got so much and so much support? And my friends were born into a world where they had no hope. When we were small, we would play together. There was no difference between us. We would play the same games. We could communicate. It was absolutely on a level and a par. And as we got older, I realized the only difference between us was that I could dream of what I wanted to do when I get older. I could dream of being a pilot or a mechanic or whatever I wanted. And these guys just had nothing. They could go through school because there was a missionary school there, but then after that, there was nothing to go to. There was no really no employment to go to. So I battled with this. God, why have you blessed me so much? And more, I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what to do with what you've given me. Because I know, what does it say in the Bible? To him who's been given much, much will be required. And I read, I can't remember, it was Tear Fund or WaterAid that did a campaign years ago now that said if you've got cold running water in your house, you're in the top 5% of the richest people in the world. Just puts things into perspective, doesn't it? It's easy for us to compare ourselves to the footballers and everything, but actually, God's given us so much, even as we are. And what do we do with that? You know, I'm a big advocate of. I love the book of James as well, where it says, you know, faith without action is dead. Faith without deeds is dead, rather. And as it says here in John, let us not love with just words and speech, but with actions and in truth. I have to admit, I've not always done that. You know, I've lived a Western life, and I've enjoyed that. And I had to close my business last year. But before then, for 27 years, I've been working, making luxury goods, designing luxury goods for people with a lot of money. And I've enjoyed that lifestyle. And fortunately, God stripped it from me. And I've been able to come into the Leprosy Mission, which is absolutely incredible, I have to say. They say the Leprosy Mission is, it was birthed in prayer and it's cradled in prayer. So the Leprosy Mission, it started by a guy who went to India, saw some people with leprosy, came back and was just praying in his front lounge, in the lounge of his house with a couple of friends. And they thought, we can't just pray about this. We need to actually do something about it. Now, of course, there was no cures in those days, so all they did was care for these people. So it started in a prayer meeting, and every day we put our computers off. Well, we don't put our computers off because we do it on Zoom, half of us, and have a prayer meeting for half an hour. And it's just a wonderful charity to be part of. So I encourage you to do whatever you can do to help people with leprosy. We run some volunteer programs, so if you're clever, unlike me, there are some research programs that you can volunteer for. So if you're into anything like that, I can point you in the right direction for that one. And then we also look for volunteer speakers just to go around different groups, sometimes churches like this, sometimes just some women's groups, Rotary groups, things like that, schools. So if you're a teacher, then we also speak in schools. So there's volunteer positions for that as well. And of course, you can also give to help as well. When I joined the Leprosy Mission, I really felt God gave me this verse. When Jesus sent out the 12 disciples, he said, "Go, as you go, tell people the kingdom of heaven is near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give." It's interesting to me that Jesus separates the sick from those who have leprosy. But it's clear all through Scripture that God has a heart for people with leprosy. So £10 a month gives life-changing reconstructive surgery. We heard there that Aloka has lost the use of her left hand. She can no longer pick leaves with it. What happens with the leprosy is the hands curl over and they become all numb, so you can no longer use them. The surgery they're talking about here, which was part of my induction, I had to watch a video of this surgery being done, which is not really my cup of tea, but they cut the hand open, they cut the 4 tendons that have curled over, and apparently we have a spare tendon in our hands, so they connect the spare tendon to the 4 that have been cut, so they can once again use the hand like that. Of course, if the feeling's gone, they don't get the feeling back, but they can at least use the hand. And it's not individual digits, they work together. But for Aloka, she would be able to pick leaves again. So that's the kind of surgery they're talking about. It costs £120, so just £10 a month would sort of cover that. And a one-off gift of £24 cures someone of leprosy. And that helps to find them as well. I love the little interview with the health worker that we saw. I think she's an absolute hero. Absolute hero. My wife's a nurse, and but she has to go and actually find the patients in the first place because they're hidden away. And when a locker said, "Oh, this health worker just turned up at my door and found me," I think, how on earth did that happen? It's incredible. So it covers finding someone, it covers curing them, and in fact, it also covers giving antibiotics to the 50 closest people to that person as well, so that they don't contract leprosy. And just to say, really, they're so grateful. You know, they don't have social security. Leprosy is one of the 10 neglected tropical diseases, which basically means there's no one pouring money into it to try and get it cured. They say with the right momentum, leprosy could be completely cured within 30 years. But unfortunately, it is down to people like you and I to do what we can, because there's no great funders sending their money to it. But the people are so grateful. They don't have social security. They don't have good healthcare. So the Leprosy Mission is an absolute godsend to these places. And of course, we know that Jesus said, "Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it also for me." So I want to encourage you to do whatever you can do. Just excuse me a second. I went to the Isle of Man in February to talk at some churches, and there was a church I went to. It was a United Reformed Church. There was about 20 people there. It was one of the first United Reformed churches I've ever been in my life. And they gave me a check for £1,800. I thought, what? This is ridiculous. And the car park wasn't full of Teslas and Range Rovers or anything like that. It was, normal people. So afterwards, I sort of inquired of this. And it turned out there were two ladies who made jam. Well, one made jam, one made marmalade. And they sold this all over the island. And all the proceeds went to the Leprosy Mission. And that was how they were able to raise so much money. And I just thought, had this sort of light bulb moment where I thought, hold on a second. In Deuteronomy, it says that it is God who gives us the ability to create wealth. And he's made us in his image, hasn't he? God created us in his own image. And God is a very creative God as well. And he's created us to be creative as well. So my challenge, it is to ask you to dip into your own pockets, but it's to ask you to go the extra mile, to be creative with what you can do. Maybe you can make jam. Maybe you've got kids or grandkids who love making cookies. Make some cookies with your grandkids and, take them around the neighbors, because let's face it, who can say no to kids selling cookies? I went to the Isle of Man last week, and they do a quiz every year to raise money for leprosy. So I've got some invites actually at the back there for quizzes. So if you wanted to host a quiz in your church or even at home, then you could do that. And we've also got some tea party invites to go along with our Bangladesh theme, tea gardens, to try and throw a tea party, invite your neighbors round. And I think it's a great way to evangelize as well, because it's soft buy-in to church, isn't it? We're doing a fundraiser to help people with leprosy. Most people are fairly compassionate and would want to help someone. And then it introduces them to church, introduces them to realizing what love is and what the church does, that it's not Bible-bashing society, that actually we're people who love people and we want to help people. So my challenge is be creative. Go the extra mile and see what you can come up with to raise extra money to help people affected by leprosy, or volunteer yourself. So I have no idea how I'm doing on time. What time do you normally finish? 10 minutes ago. Let's end it there. I could talk all night, that's the problem. Let's end it there. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be through there. We've got some leaflets, we've got some books. If you're into reading, you can take some of the books. There's some kids' books as well. There's some prayer diaries that you can take, and there's some kids' prayer diaries. So if you want to pray with your kids or with your grandkids, then it will help them to formulate some prayers for people with leprosy. And then I've got different ways of giving as well. Some cash envelopes. There is even a sum up. So if you've not brought cash, you can pay on your card or your phone. There's even on the poster out there, there's a QR code, so you can scan the QR code. That'll take you straight through to the giving page. And there's also some direct debit forms. So if you wanted to pay by direct debit, you can do that. Some people pay £24 a month. Some people want to pay £24 over a year, so they pay £2 a month. But just think about what you can do, and just encourage you to do that. And hopefully we'll have a nice cup of tea. Do I hand over to somebody? Ah, the comedian's back.
You can go. Yeah, you sit over there. We're not finished with you.
You've not finished.